Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University.
Hello learners, I Ritu Gaur, Assistant Professor of English at Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University, welcomes you all in the first year Bachelor's in English video series. Fasten your seatbelt. Now we are going to learn towards the journey of literature and culture. So are you ready? So let's start our today's session with Unit 13. In Unit 13, we are going to learn about the introduction, the concept of literature, the concept of culture, and relationship between literature and culture and some of the keywords. Let's start today's session with the wonderful quote. E.M. Forster has said that what is wonderful about great literature is that it transforms the man who reads it towards the condition of the man who wrote and brings to birth in us also the creative impulse. Let me remind you that whenever you are in the 12th standard or you have read any poetry, any drama, any novel, what happened at that time? The wonderful about great literature is it transforms the man who reads it. So whenever we are reading literature, we had some notion, we can relate it to the person. Let me give you the example of 7 Steps in the Sky. In Gujarati, the book's name is Saat Pagla Akashma, written by Kundanika Kapadia. So, in that novel, whenever you are reading it, you can come to know that what happened at that time with the woman. So, in that way, we are reading it and the condition of the man who wrote it. So, at that time, when the Kundanika Kapadia has written that book, so what exactly happened that time? At that time, what was the condition of woman and what was the surrounding, what were the tradition? So, it brings to birth in us also the creative impulse. So, whenever we are reading, we feel something, we may even connect with the character or any person or some incident of our life. So that is the wonderful thing about literature. Now, what is the concept of literature? The word literature derives from the Latin word litera, a letter of the alphabet. The Latin word for literature was simply the plural litera, and this basic sense literature embraces everything is written. This is a very important point for your exam point of view because there might be a question like in which language the word, there might be a question about that from which language this literature word come from. So at that time you should remember that it comes from the Latin word. As you know, in English language, the English language is a very flexible language. So English has adopted so many words from the Greek, Latin, French. So here the literature word comes from the Latin word litera. So earlier time that is considered in literature, what is literature? So that everything is written. It was used to say that. It is in a general sense. There are 2 terms, in a broad way and narrow terms. Oral or written, what is more important here is that these words are supposed to stimulate the imagination and confront the reader with a unique vision of life. So what is important here is even the oral or written literature, that make no difference, of course, when it comes to oral, because earlier there was a oral tradition. So, but when it comes to written, it is a documentation. So it is a very important. But apart from this, the important thing is that words are supposed to stimulate the imagination. So maybe your favorite poetry or drama or anything, you should remember it. So whenever you are reading it, something happened within you. They stimulate the imagination. Here I have given the example of wonderful poems of Robert Frost, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. Here the poet described the snowy evening. But look at the title, stopping by not someone, stopping by woods. Woods, because when the poet was going somewhere and it was a winter and snowy evening. So the woods, that forest was so lovely, and there are last stanza, there are some four lines which is really remarkable in English literature. I would like to recite that the woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep. Miles to go before I sleep, miles to go before I sleep. Here, in the literal meaning, is that miles to go before I sleep. Here, literal meaning of sleep doesn't mean that just go to the bed at night. No. Figuratively, the poet wants to convey the feeling that, the emotion that stimulate the imagination that the woods are lovely, dark and deep. Means, even in our life, sometimes the surroundings is so great, we feel comfortable, we find that okay, this is the heaven, but I have promises to keep, maybe promises to ourselves, promises to the family or society. So there may be so many promises that I have to fulfill. And if I want to fulfill that promises, I cannot stand here. I have to move forward. I have to go further. Miles to go before I sleep. Sleep means before death. We don't know when will the we don't know that when will death come and knocks our door. So it is important that we should do our work, and of course the surroundings was so captivated that the poet wants to stay there more, but he has to go. In the same way, in our life, when something is so comfortable, so great, but if we have some promises to keep, if we have some goals to achieve, then we should go further. So here the lines come, with a unique vision of life. So by reading poetry or drama or any literature about the great literature, we feel the same unique vision of life. In the 18th century, literature was viewed as well-written books of an imaginative or creative kind. So in the 18th century, the definition is changed. Like now, not everything that is written, even the article in newspaper or the news in newspaper, it is not literature. So in 18th century, they refined that what is well-written books of imaginative or creative kind. Creation is very important because whenever there is in literature some kind of imagination, some kind of creativity should be there. Good literature is said to demonstrate craft and artistry and has the power to raise questions, provide fresh point of view, and expand the understanding of self and the world. This is the quality of a good literature. Okay, so we have started with this example of 7 steps in the sky. If you haven't read it, it is also available in Gujarati, Saat Pagla Akashma. You must read it. Here that its power to raise questions. In Saat Pagla Akashma and the 7 steps in the sky, there is a central character named Vasudha. She raised the question that is it okay to do whole life the only household chores? Is it okay to just being a wife, mother or daughter-in-law? Is it okay? It raises a question, provide fresh point of view, because in the end Vasudha has transformed herself, and what she has done in the end, that there is a place where she went and how she changed the whole life, that expand the understanding of the self and the world. So for exploration, even sometimes to understand yourself, literature helps through the character, through the storyline, through the plot, climax. So this is a power of great literature. It raises question, it also gives solution. Now, the concept of culture. Again, from the MCQ point of view, you should remember that English word culture is derived from the Latin term cult or cultus, meaning tilling or cultivating or refining and worship. In sum, it means cultivating and refining a thing to such an extent that its end product evokes our admiration and respect. This is practically the same as Sanskriti or Sanskrit language. The term Sanskriti has been derived from the root kri, means to do, of Sanskrit language. 3 words came from this root. Kri means Prakriti, basic matter or condition. Sanskriti refined matter or condition, and Vikriti means modified or decayed matter or condition. When Prakriti or a raw material is refined, it becomes Sanskriti, and when broken or damaged, it becomes Vikriti. Sanskriti and Vikriti, they both are opposite. What is Sanskriti? It is a term, is refined culture. Now, let me remind you the ancient times, how the human being evolves. In ancient times, the humans don't have the proper notion how to eat, how to speak, and even what to wear. If you remember your childhood days, you have seen the pictures of a man wearing nothing but just cover some parts of the body with leaves, right? And how evolving day by day, and now we have a refined term, refined oil. You might have seen that in every oil. So refined, which is very pure, very nourished form. So that is refined culture. So Sanskriti means now we have to do Sanskriti, refined matter or condition, and Vikriti, which is very opposite of Sanskriti, where something, the belief, the norms, which is not acceptable in our culture. So that is a concept of culture. It is generally accepted that culture embodies the way humans live with and treat others, and how they develop or react to change in their environment. You might have seen the different cultures, right? So in Gujarat, in Punjab, everywhere the culture is different. In some culture, people greet with namaskara, some greet with hi, hello, some greet with some other kind of gesture. So it differs from person to person, it differs from the region. Now, how the way human live with and treat others, that is very important. That how you can talk with another person, it shows your culture. Sometimes something happened and we say, oh, that person is not cultured, this is not our culture, we can't do it. So what does it mean exactly? That how we should behave, how we should treat others, and how to react to change in the environments. So that is called culture. Definition of culture in broad and narrow sense. So there is little c and big C. It is also very important in your question as well. First, let me tell you about little c, that is BBV, belief, behavior, and values. Belief. What is belief? That I believe in something. I believe, as Gandhiji's belief was truth, non-violence, and his behavior should, whatever your belief is there, it should demonstrate, it should apply in your behavior, and that is very important thing. And values. So this little c considered this three: belief, behavior, and values. Big C, it shows about music, literature, and art. It also differ from this culture to culture. So in music there are uh, classical music, jazz music, western modern music, so pop music. In that way it is very different from in the culture. Now, relation between literature and culture. Literature reflects the history of civilization, all the written manifestation of culture from literature. Now let me tell you, whenever writer, poet, or dramatist, whatever they are writing, it is of course influenced from the culture around them, and it is also depict the history of the particular time. So literature reflects the history of civilization. Literature teaches us to engage with the past. We don't know what exactly happened in the past, what was the scenario, how they were living, what were their beliefs, what were their values. We don't know anything about that. But we can come to know through this literature. Shakespeare, Milton, Chinua Achebe, Virginia Woolf all take us to a journey into the society of a past time. What kind of people lived in that society, how they behaved, and what were the norms of life they followed. All this is the subject of literature. Earlier I told you about the 7 steps in the sky, right? So at that time, when Kundanika Kapadia has written this novel, at that time that it was the pathetic condition of a woman, that how suffocated, how toxic environment it was. and how it should changed from time to time. So that point of past, that history is depicted here. In this way, Kundanika Kapadia has mentioned that how women's need change, how the woman's condition should be evolving, right? So, in that way, Kundanika Kapadia has written 7 Steps in the Sky. So, every literature, every piece of art is depicted some kind of narration from the past. Shakespeare, of course, you know, the greatest dramatist of English literature. He has written so many dramas, plays, which depicted how the women were there and the women were not allowed to play as an artist. So they have a gender role and how the male performed as a female. So that was the scenario. And the king and the queen and what were their conspiracy and everything. That if we, it is very wonderfully said in literature that of course we can't meet great authors right now. Maybe you are a fan of Shakespeare. We can't meet him right now. But through the literature, through his dramas, through his sonnet, so whatever the person, the literary artist has written at that time, we can meet him. Chinua Achebe, Milton. I have put some pictures in a very chronicle manner, in a very chronicle season. So I have put all these pictures of Shakespeare, Milton, Chinua Achebe and Virginia Woolf. So you get familiarized with them through pictures. So first is Shakespeare, second is Chinua Achebe, third is Milton. Milton has written The Paradise Lost. Wonderful thing about devil and Satan and how the quote he has given to us that it is better to reign in the hell than to serve in heaven. So how Adam and Eve and what were the belief of religion at that time, he has depicted wonderfully in Paradise Lost. Virginia Woolf. Generally, we had this notion that there's a woman and the freedom and feministic things only in India. But no, Virginia Woolf is not Indian. Even at that time, she has written the book called A Rooms of One Own. What is A Rooms of One Own? It shows that a girl, a woman needs her own room. Why own room? Where she can live for herself. Every girl, every woman needs some freedom. And for that, she has written A Rooms of One Own. Because only and only then because only that is helping the women to nourish, to become great. So they all take us to a journey into the society of a past time. So they have depicted, this is just an example, there are so many literature, the literary artists, the poet, dramatists, and every age has their own characteristics, every age has their own literature, and they shows us what is relationship between literature and cultures, because at that time when it was written, what was the culture, what were their belief, it is surely mentioned in the literary work. And through that, poet or dramatist wants to tell us that how it was at that time. In our unit 14, you are going to learn about the Gora, the novel Gora by Rabindranath Tagore, where you can learn more about that how the relationship between literature and culture is mentioned in the particular timeline. The particular author is trying to tell us about the whole thing. In conclusion, literature emerges out of culture and cultures is propagated by literature. It is mutually beneficial connection that they have. If culture is a way of life, literature drafts it in the most authentic manner. History is only a record of events. Literature is actually a record of people. So here in the conclusion, I am trying to convey that how the relationship between literature and culture is both together, go in hand in literature. And it is mutually beneficial connection that they have, because of course that the importance of literature and importance of culture is both go into hand in hand. If culture is a way of life, literature drafts it in the most authentic manner. So culture is a way of life means how we have to live. So literature drafts it. It makes the documentation of in a most authentic manner. And history is not just a record of events. So if you read a history, you might not get stimulate the imagination. You might not feel something. You just remember, okay, that happened in the history. But when it comes to the literature, it gives the record of people. And there are some literary form like allegory. So you can directly not write about the political event, because at that time the democracy was not there. So you cannot write about some person, some political figure. But you can write about the person about whom you want to portray in a same way but with different name. So that is a charm of literature, with imagination, that unique vision of life, it must be there. So in that way, literature and culture both go into hand, and there is a relationship between them. So in next lecture, unit 14, we are going to deep into this with the Rabindranath Tagore's novel Gora. Thank you.
स्वाध्यायः